Hello and welcome to the Old Garage number 36. I'm Wild Bill and we have questions, silliness, shout out, you know the routine, so let's get with the question. And the first one I have came from the episode on Charles Talbot, and it comes from James MacArthur, and his question is, I noticed that the red vehicle at 526 has several spare tires. Just how easy or difficult was it to change one of these tires out? Today it's not too difficult for a driver to do. Would a driver back then be able to do it? Well, fair enough question. I mean, changing a tire nowadays, is pretty simple. You jack up your car, you got your spare, you can flip, bam, 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 done. How you changed tires back then, it was really dependent on which type of tire system you had, because you had those that were based on the Dunlop idea of a tire, in which the tire is actually glued to the rim. It's permanently fixed. You can't just take the tire off and slap it on. And then you also had the Michelin style of tire, where the tire was simply held on by the pressure inside the tire. Now, both of these had their advantages and disadvantages, because no matter what you were driving, I mean, there were going to be nails all over the place. Horseshoe nails littered the roads all over the world at that time. I live in Northeast Ohio. Those dirt places out here where they litter the roads with these nails, thanks to the Amish. But nonetheless, getting a flat tire was just expected. It's going to happen if you go for a drive. Now, if you have the Dunlop system, if you get a puncture, you really don't have the means to repair that puncture, on the tire itself. You just don't. So what you would have to do is remove the tire, the rim, and remove the wheel. Now, some cars you removed the entire wheel to do this. Others you had detachable rims that you could use to do this, and that's how the Dunlop did it. And the advantage of that, was that if you had very muddy roads and you need all the traction you can get, your Dunlop tire, it's not going to spin off the wheel. It's you've got it's going to give you all you can get. But of course, if you do have a flat tire, it's actually repairing the flat itself is a process that takes about 8 hours in a shop to do. So you have no choice but to just change the tire. Now, with the Michelin system, you could actually remove the inner tube while the car was on the road and repair a flat. All right, if you needed to, you could remove, just remove whatever nail was sticking in there, just pull it out with a pair of pliers, and then, you can either remove the inner tube its entirety, or at least the portion of it near where the failure was, and patch it up, shove the tire back in there, and then reinflate it. And keep in mind that cars at that time, at least your higher-end touring cars usually came equipped with air pumps, either as little accessories in the toolkit or even sometimes being powered by the engine. So, the fact that you're going to get flat tires was expected. So, the disadvantage with the Michelin system is that it was very easy to spin a tire on the rim under muddy situations, high torque situations like that. And if that happens, now you pretty much destroyed the tire or probably the wheel or both. So they had, there were the challenges there. But whether you were Michelin or Dunlop based, changing the tire then wasn't much, at least the wheel wasn't much different than it is today. And in fact, and this makes sense because you had to do it a whole lot more. So you couldn't make it too complicated. It had to be fairly simple, and it still is. The Michelin system did allow you to actually repair the tire properly instead of having to actually swap them out, or at least have the opportunity to do that. When it eventually won over the Dunlop system, and of course the Michelin eventually developed into the tubeless tires that we have today. So was it hard? No, not really. It was expected, and when you were swap the rim, swap the wheel, just bam, 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 go. So. All right, thank you. And next question I have, this was from the episode on Kamonosuke Uchiyama, and this was from Trotter Malone. Long question. It says, Wild Bill, I have been trying to make sense out of the nomenclature used to identify the various sizes of Rudge-Whitworth wheel hubs. Lore has it that the numerical size designator, i.e. 32, 42, 52, etc., is a bearing size, a spline count, or a spline length, i.e. distance between the bearings. I have examined and in many cases measured, in addition to the 3 sizes above, the 120 and 140 also. The only fact I have concluded for sure is that the larger the number, the larger the hub and spindle. There does not appear to be anything in the physical layout of the design that would correspond to a numerical size designation in any standard units of measure. So, to my request, in your automotive historical pursuits, have you come across any documentation, sources, libraries, or individuals who might be positioned to provide insight into the origins of the Rudge-Whitworth sizing nomenclature? Okay. Well, this is fun because if you go and with a very specific question like this, if you go to have a question like that and you were to ask 2 historians who are specialists in the area and ask for their opinions, you'll probably get 3 or more opinions out of those 2 historians. And there was a bit of that going on with this question. I made a couple calls. I had my suspicions as well. And in fact, the thing is that Rudge-Whitworth is a company that is going to get an episode at some point, but it's going to be years from now, so I don't think answering this question is going to be doing too many spoilers. But just to give you a brief about who they are, this is a company, British company. Their heyday was pre-World War I and right around there. They initially were manufacturers of bicycles, famous for bicycles. They made motorcycles. They did make their own makes of cars, at least cycle cars, nothing substantial. But they did make bearings or wheel hubs and wheels. And they did this aftermarket, specifically trying to break into the Grand Prix market. And so that, is without dispute. Okay, I mean, and no historian is going to argue those points. Now the question is these nomenclatures, and out of the various opinions I got, 2 of them actually make sense to me. I still haven't gotten the documents that I was promised at the time of recording this from one guy. But again, there's going to be an episode, and if I get it, I'll let you know, one way or another. But theory number 1 is that the problem is really the same problem that happened to the Mars Climate Orbiter. That when these particular wheels and hubs were being built, they were being focused on breaking into the Grand Prix market, which at that time was based in France, which was being run by the ACF. And so all of the requirements for French Grand Prix cars were, of course, all in French units. Now this is like, okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, prior to World War I, the French metric system, at least in its linear measurements, was slightly different than the metric elsewhere. And modern metric, if you're using, the modern metric system, and you're trying to say, okay, well, is this, how many millimeters is this? How many centimeters is this? And you're going to go, wait a minute, it's not going to line up. Well, it's not, it's because they're a little bit different. And this is something that, whenever you're looking at specs like that going, from France to there or to Italy or from France to Britain or anywhere else, you'll see that kind of confusion does happen elsewhere in the industry. That's theory number 1. I actually think there could be credence to that. The other theory that I got, and I'm waiting on the paperwork on this, is that what Rudge-Whitworth did was recognize this problem in the first place, because you had Italians thought that a meter was this long, the French thought it was this long, the British went, what's a meter, and the Americans did the same thing. So they just created their own sizing system, and it was a numerical system that was not really roughly corresponding to specific sizes, but they were rather corresponded to specific cars. And what Rudge-Whitworth was doing was saying, okay, this manufacturer makes this car, so this size, number 32, is for this type car and for this manufacturer's hub. And then as they made different sizes, those numbers actually correspond to manufacturers. I kind of question that myself, but he says he's got proof of it, so as soon as I get some, I'll let you know. But that's what I found out on that. So there you go. Now, I got another question here. Now, this one was from the Felice Nazaro episode, and again, James MacArthur. And his question is, the strategy of conservative driving until the last minute, is it still employed today? I would think not, as the quality of racing cars would be better today. Okay, you'd think so, but you know what? There's 120 some years of technology difference between those race cars and today's race cars, but there's principles that absolutely have remained the same. And now here's one of them that should be pretty obvious and empirical, and that is a modern race car, if you drive it too fast, it will either fly off the road or it will catastrophically fail somehow. Something's going to break, okay? And this is true today. The engineering that goes into these cars is serious, and the tire technology, the aerodynamics, the engine, the horsepower, and how much power they can cram into how little weight. All right, this is all being done today. So if you drive, these things are speed demon vehicles, but yes, you can push them too hard. And the drivers today, modern race drivers, are as much engineers as they are drivers. They have to understand the technology of the engineering behind their cars and what they can and can't do. Okay, so they don't push them too fast. At the same time, a modern race car, you can't drive too slow. If you do, it'll fly off the track or it will catastrophically break. Okay, you can't drive them too slow either. A couple of reasons. Number one, if it's too slow, the aerodynamics aren't going to work properly. It's not going to stick to the track. These things are designed to go fast. If you drive it too slow, it's not going to have the traction due to the downward g-forces that it's supposed to have to keep it stable. Also, if it's going too slow, it's going to overheat. The car is not designed to drive, the engine's not designed to not be working. It has to. And if the engine's not working hard enough, it can't keep itself cool. You're gonna tear the engine apart. So the driver has to know this in a modern race car, okay? You can't drive it too slow, you can't drive it too fast. You have to know that sweet spot in there, and you have to understand where to be in it to keep the car on the track as long as possible and as fit as possible to win a race. That's a modern race car. Now let's go back to, the time of Felice Nazzaro. I mean, great example would be the Beast of Turin, okay? This massive Fiat race car. Okay, it is a race car that absolutely you can drive it. If you drive it too fast, it will fly off the road, or you will break it catastrophically. Okay, it will, you'll snap a crankshaft or an axle or who knows what. You will catastrophically fail to break this car if you drive it too fast. However, if you drive that same vehicle too slow, you will also break it. Now, the issue of flying off the road may not be as much because, downforce aerodynamics were not in practice in the 19-teens and aughts. But the idea that the air needs to be moving to cool the thing certainly was, as well as the types of RPMs that the engine is wanting to operate at for its maximum efficiency. And if you don't achieve those, it's going to overheat or it's going to burn out, and bam, you've just blown up your engine and wrecked your race car. So even back then, there was that sweet spot. You couldn't drive it too slow or you'd break it. You couldn't drive it too fast or you'd break it. And Felice Nazzaro and Vincenzo Lancia were both good, intuitive engineers in their own right, and they understood that sweet spot probably better than any of the other racers of their day. And, well, I'll say with one exception, Emil Levasseur, but unfortunately he passed away way too early. I think he would have probably eclipsed them both had he lived. But nonetheless, it was the fact that both of these men understood this engineering principle and understood that sweet spot. They just played it very differently. Lancia went, okay, I'm going to keep the car way out there and I'm going to push it hard. I'm not going to push it too hard, but then again, you stay at that top end of that sweet spot long enough, you're still going to really fatigue your car. Whereas Nazzaro went, okay, I'm going to back up a bit. I'm going to stay where it needs to be, but just not quite as fast, not fatigue the car, so that when I really need the power, I've got it and the car's not going to break into pieces on me. So, and that's still very valid today. The technology's changed. We're certainly, the things that are in modern race cars they didn't have. But that idea, that never grows old, because the race cars back then and the race cars of today, they still have that same sweet spot. They're still designed to race, and the speeds and the safety may be different, but the principle still stays. So, alrighty, silliness. Yeah, I do have silliness. Now, on the community, we started talking about a gardening thing. Well, I figured, you know what, I do have a silliness section, so why not do a gardening silliness? You know, Ye Ol Garden section of the Ye Ol Garage. And for those who don't know, I've got a 10-foot by 10-foot dog run that was on the property when we moved here this last July. I don't have a dog. So what we did was, you know, I kind of, last fall I torched the ground around it. I laid cardboard down on it. And it's now getting about time to start gardening. I mean, would have been this weekend, except today started off beautiful, gorgeous sunny day, and rainy and stormy, you know, by afternoon, and now we're going to have, you know, several days of freezing temperatures again. So next weekend, maybe. But anywho, here it is. Let me know what you think. And so this is the new garden. Now, as you can see, it's a nice sunny day right now. It looks beautiful. However, it's not going to stay that way. We're about to hit freezing temperatures for a few days, so we were planning on getting started this weekend, but not going to be this weekend. But as you can see, this is the space. Obviously was a dog run. You can see all along the bottom here, the previous owners had placed these boards all along there, probably to keep the dog from digging out. Okay, I have to agree that if I were stuck in this thing, I'd want to dig out of it. But so we got some cleanup to do here over the next few days, and if this is acceptable, as things start to grow, we'll have some gardening silliness on vintage car history. We'll have a vintage car garden here, but as you can see, we've got a lot of work to do, but we'll get her done. So yeah, in the comments, let me know what you know, if you'd like to see that on for you know, over the next few months, and see what I actually grow, you know, or don't grow, or what gets eaten by critters or whatever. Yeah, let me know in the comments. Okay. Alrighty, shout out. Now, I will admit this channel has not been active for almost 2 years now, but it's really a cool one. It's Fountainhead Antique Auto Museum. Now, the reason why, I mean, if you haven't found this channel, because they don't have a whole lot of subscribers, but I'll tell you, there's like 130 some videos on it, and it's got some really good content that's worth a watch if you want to see some of these old vintage cars in action, as well as some other stuff, you know, motorcycles, some bikes, and other, you know, just automotive, you know, paraphernalia, you know, from that era. So that's what we have for the old garage today, and I will see you next time. Peace.